This day at the New York Planetarium was meant to be special. No one could have predicted that an ordinary public lecture on astrophysics would turn into an event that would change many lives. And most importantly, no one expected Spider-Man himself to be exactly where he needed to be, teaching an important lesson not only to the bullies but to everyone present. On this evening, many would understand that sometimes the brightest stars burn not in space, but in the hearts of ordinary people, and that behind apparent simplicity, something amazing can hide. Subscribe to the channel, hit like, and don't miss new videos every day at 2 o'clock. Peter Parker stood at the entrance to the planetarium's main hall, watching the gradually gathering visitors. He was drawn here not only by his love for science. His spider sense suggested he might be needed today. Over years of working as a superhero, Peter had learned to trust this feeling, even if at first glance nothing seemed to threaten danger. The recently renovated planetarium looked impressive. Thousands of stars twinkled on the dome, creating the illusion of open space, and the latest projection equipment allowed immersion into the most remote corners of the universe. The evening lecture was supposed to be special. A renowned astrophysicist was going to talk about the latest discoveries in black hole research. Peter himself was eagerly awaiting this presentation. In his school years, astrophysics was one of his favorite subjects, and even now, despite his busy life as a superhero, he tried to keep up with the latest scientific achievements. The starry sky on the dome rotated slowly, creating a hypnotic effect. The latest generation projectors reproduced every detail with stunning clarity, from large star clusters to barely visible nebulae. Peter remembered how Uncle Ben first brought him to the planetarium as a child. The equipment was much simpler then, but even those basic projections ignited in young Peter a passion for science that only grew stronger over time. Gradually, the hall filled with people. Peter noticed dedicated science students with notebooks at the ready, families with children, and even several well-known professors from local universities among the visitors. Amazing how space unites such different people, he thought, remembering his own adventures beyond Earth. But his thoughts were interrupted when he noticed something unusual at the other end of the hall. Peter's attention was drawn to a teenager about 14 years old, sitting in the front row. His worn but clean clothes spoke of modest means, but his eyes burned with genuine interest in science. In his tattered notebook, he was diligently taking notes, completely immersed in the upcoming lecture. Peter noticed how carefully the boy handled his simple pencil, as if it were the most valuable tool in the world. Something about this boy reminded Peter of himself in his school years. The same thin frame, somewhat awkward, but with an obvious spark of intelligence in his eyes. Even the way of hunching over his notebook was similar. Peter couldn't help but smile, remembering how he used to spend hours over textbooks while other kids were having fun after school. Behind the young astronomy enthusiast sat a group of teenagers led by Brad, whose expensive clothes and confident smirks sharply contrasted with the boy's simplicity. Peter immediately recognized the type. People like Brad think expensive things make them better than others. Their whispers and snickers didn't bode well. "Hey, look at his shoes!" Peter heard Brad's friend's muffled voice. "I bet he found them in a dumpster." A wave of laughter rippled through the group. The boy in front tensed slightly. It was clear he could hear the mockery, but was trying his best not to show it. Peter watched as the boy hunched even more over his notebook, trying to concentrate on his notes. One of the pages showed carefully drawn constellation diagrams, quite accurate, Peter noted to himself. It was obvious that the boy was seriously interested in astronomy. While Brad's group continued to whisper and snicker, the lights in the hall began to dim, preparing for the presentation. The projection on the dome changed to a breathtaking view of the Orion Nebula. Peter saw how the young astronomer's eyes widened in wonder at this cosmic spectacle. But his spider sense suggested that the evening might not go as smoothly as hoped. "Hey, second-hand nerd! Maybe you should look for a job to buy normal clothes instead of wasting time on space?" Brad's loud voice interrupted the lecture just as the professor was discussing recent discoveries in dark matter research. Alex shrank in his chair, clutching his notebook closer, as if it were a shield that could protect him from mockery. "You think your scribbles about stars will help you become someone?" Brad continued, rising from his seat. His expensive sneakers squeaked against the floor as he took a step forward. Look at him, even his shoelaces are different colors. Probably thinks it's a cool science experiment. His friend's laughter echoed through the hall. Several visitors turned around, but no one intervened. The lecturer tried to restore order, but his voice was lost in the noise. Alex sat motionless, his shoulders trembling, with unwanted tears glistening in the corners of his eyes. His fingers desperately clutched the notebook containing months of observations and research. You know what's really funny? Brad raised his voice, clearly enjoying the attention. He actually thinks he can become an astronomer. Hey, poor boy, let me tell you a secret. You need money for education, not just dreams about stars. At that moment, something changed in the hall. Peter had already left his spot. Within a minute, Spider-Man's silhouette appeared in the dome's shadow. Watching from above, he saw how the injustice of the situation was reflected on other visitors' faces. Some looked away, others fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats, but it was clear that no one liked the situation. On the planetarium's dome, a collision of galaxies was being displayed, a majestic and frightening sight. The cosmic presentation cast bizarre shadows on the faces of those present, giving the scene an almost surrealistic character. Spider-Man knew it was time to intervene, but he also understood that simply intimidating the bully wouldn't solve the problem. Something more was needed. You know, there's something really interesting about space, came Spider-Man's familiar voice as he descended on his web right in front of Brad. The superhero hung upside down, face to face with the bully. At that moment, a supernova flashed on the dome, flooding the hall with bright light and creating dramatic shadows. For example, how smaller stars often turn out to be more important than big ones. Big stars burn out quickly, leaving only emptiness behind. But small ones burn long and steady, giving life to entire planetary systems. Brad froze in place, his confidence instantly evaporating. His friends slowly backed away, not expecting such a turn of events. But you know what's even more interesting? Spider-Man continued, performing a graceful turn in the air. How some people, like these big stars, try to burn everything around them with their arrogance. While others, he pointed to Alex, quietly and persistently work, creating something truly important. Alex watched the scene with wide eyes, unable to believe that Spider-Man himself had stood up for him. A crowd of spectators gathered around, mesmerized by the scene. The space projection continued to rotate, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. I notice your notes about star movements in the Orion constellation. Spider-Man addressed Alex, still hanging upside down. I must say, your orbital mechanics calculations are impressive, especially for someone your age. Alex's face lit up at the unexpected praise. Wait, you understand something about astrophysics? One of Brad's friends asked incredulously. Spider-Man smirked under his mask. Well, you know, when you're swinging between skyscrapers, you can't help but get interested in physics. Though I have to admit, some of Alex's formulas are complex even for me. Brad stood silently, his face gradually turning red with shame. The contemptuous smirk disappeared, giving way to confusion and embarrassment. At that moment, the planetarium's dome showed the birth of a new star system. It seemed as if the universe itself was illustrating the ongoing changes. Now then, Spider-Man jumped down from his web and landed next to Alex. Maybe you'd like to tell everyone about your research? I'm sure many would be interested. He gestured for other visitors to come closer. The projection of the Milky Way on the dome created a magical atmosphere, reflecting in the eyes of those gathered. Alex hesitated at first, but then, encouraged by Spider-Man's nod, opened his notebook. You see, I noticed a strange pattern in the movement of certain stars. He began, his voice gradually becoming more confident. Usually, stars move in specific orbits around the galaxy's center, but they behave differently. His fingers glided over pages where star movement patterns were carefully drawn. Here, he pointed to a particularly detailed diagram. I've been tracking their movement for the past 3 months. And if my calculations are correct, This might indicate the presence of an invisible object, possibly a black hole. Brad and his friends, still in their seats, were now listening intently. Their faces showed a mixture of amazement and shame. It was particularly striking to see Brad, who had just been mocking the nerd, now watching the explanations in fascination. "This is truly impressive work," commented the lecturer, who had come over to listen. "Such observations are usually made with professional equipment, yet you managed to notice this with the naked eye and a simple telescope. You definitely have talent." Spider-Man watched as Alex's face beamed with pride. "You know what's coolest about science?" The superhero addressed the audience. "It doesn't care about the price of your clothes or what family you come from. The only things that matter are your mind and desire for knowledge." The projection on the dome changed, now showing distant galaxies, as if reminding everyone present of the infinite possibilities that science opens up. Some visitors began asking Alex questions, genuinely interested in his research. After the lecture, Spider-Man invited Alex to the planetarium's roof. The setting sun painted New York skyscrapers in golden hues, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They sat on the edge of the roof, legs dangling, with the city spread out before them like a map. "You know, I used to be just like you, a guy who loved science more than expensive clothes," the superhero shared, looking at the horizon. "Many didn't understand my passion, thought it was a waste of time. But it was science that ultimately helped me become who I am now." Alex listened attentively, continuing to make notes in his notebook. Now he was recording not just astronomical observations, but also the words of his new mentor. How did you deal with the mockery?" he asked quietly, still processing the events of the evening. "Honestly? Not always well," Spider-Man admitted. "There were times when I wanted to give up everything. But you know what I realized? Those who try to put others down often suffer from insecurity themselves. They see in you what they lack: passion, determination, genuine interest in something bigger than just outward appearance." The superhero pointed to a bright spot appearing in the sky. "See that star? That's Betelgeuse, one of the brightest stars in the Orion constellation. It's thousands of times larger than our sun. But you know what's interesting? Even such a huge star appears tiny from here. It reminds me that sometimes we need to look at things from a broader perspective." Alex quickly made a note in his notebook, then confessed, "I never thought Spider-Man would be interested in astronomy. The news only shows your fights with criminals." "Oh, believe me, between saving the city, I love reading scientific journals," the superhero chuckled. "And your passion for knowledge is worth more than all the designer brands in the world. Because one day, it's kids like you who will make discoveries that change the world." The sun had almost disappeared behind the horizon, painting the sky in deep purple tones. The city lights were beginning to turn on one by one, creating their own version of a starry sky below. "You know what?" said Spider-Man, rising to his feet. "I think you have a great future in science. And don't let anyone convince you otherwise." When they returned to the planetarium's main hall, most visitors had already left. The last projections of the starry sky slowly rotated under the dome, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Spider-Man discreetly retreated into the shadows but continued to observe what was happening. Suddenly, Brad approached Alex. His walk no longer radiated superiority, and his eyes showed sincere remorse. "Listen," he began uncertainly, fidgeting with the sleeve of his expensive jacket. "I was wrong. Your research is really cool. And how you calculated all this practically without equipment, that's impressive." Alex looked surprised, but there was no gloating or triumph in his expression, only calm acceptance of the apology. Spider-Man watched this scene from the ceiling, his spider sense no longer detecting any danger in the hall. Instead, it sensed the birth of something new and positive. Maybe you could help me with my astronomy project?" Brad continued. "I have lots of cool equipment at home, telescope, computer for data processing. But honestly, I don't even know how to use any of it properly." Brad's friends, standing behind him, looked different too. Their previous arrogance had been replaced by genuine interest. "Is it true that you can show us this black hole you were talking about?" one of them asked. "That would be really cool." The projection on the dome changed to show a galactic cluster, thousands of stars bound together by gravity. It seemed as if the universe itself was approving this unexpected reconciliation and the birth of a new friendship. "I think we could arrange some joint observations," Alex replied after a small pause. "I have several interesting ideas for research, but we definitely need more serious equipment to verify them." Spider-Man smiled under his mask. His mission here was complete, but something much more important was beginning. He watched as yesterday's enemies became allies, united by a common goal and interest in science. This story teaches us that a true hero isn't someone who wears expensive clothes or boasts about their superiority, but someone who stays true to their passions and dreams despite others' mockery. And sometimes we need someone to remind us that there's something special in each of us, even if we haven't seen it in ourselves yet. Friends, today we saw how one incident at a planetarium changed many lives. But most importantly, we understood that anyone can be a hero. You don't need to be Spider-Man to stand up for someone weaker or help someone believe in themselves. Sometimes it's enough to simply show kindness and see the good in others that they haven't yet discovered in themselves. On this evening in the planetarium, something greater than just reconciliation was born. A new team of young researchers was formed, ready to explore the mysteries of the cosmos together. And somewhere there, among New York skyscrapers, Spider-Man knew that his work here had truly made a difference. Because sometimes the most important victories are won not in battles with supervillains, but in ordinary human hearts.